Chapter 40. The Ultimate Power, Godlike. Skinner put the final touches on the next batch of chapters and held the manuscript at arm's length in front of him. He raised a crooked smile and muttered, "It's more history than fiction." He gave a small chuckle and laid the manuscript on the corner of the desk in his study and went to the bedroom to get ready. As he dressed, he thought about the abduction of Andrew, aka Slick, and Anjanette. He felt warm and cozy inside. The warmth turned to excitement as he recalled the first slits on their jugulars, the insertion of a clear tube, and the look in their eyes as they watched the tube turn red and their blood flow into the bowl. The sight, sound, and smells of exchanging their sexual organs refilled his senses. The relived memory made him shiver with delight. He lingered on the feeling. He had never been this content and clear-minded before in his life. He had purpose and direction, and he knew that this novel would be the crowning literary achievement of his career and the legacy of his rampage. He would have it all: fame, fortune, and a secret purpose to a higher calling. He had held the ultimate power in his hands, life and death. He had felt godlike. He wanted to feel it again. He never wanted to lose that feeling. Skinner's smile and self-confidence grew as he walked into the agency's office building. It wasn't just the completion of another section of the novel. It was also the knowledge that they had no idea how close to the truth the novel was and how intimately involved he was in the murders, especially one of their own, Teresa Taylor. Martha Winslow, his new agent, greeted him with the deference that he hoped for now and planned on demanding in the future. At his side, he held the second installment of the manuscript. He had raised it no more than a few inches when she anxiously snatched it from his hand. With Skinner following close behind, she eagerly went to her comfortable reading chair in the corner of her office, flipped on the light, and read voraciously. Within a few pages, she was cringing and wincing. Her hands continually clenched and unclenched as she read. Halfway through the manuscript, she stopped, looked up at him, and shivered as if struck by a piercing cold wind. Then she dove back in ravenously. Skinner reveled in every wrinkle of grimace, every shiver, and every wide-eyed expression. As she turned over the last page, she looked up at him and sat silently for a few seconds. Then she began to gush over his work. She marveled at how he fully captured the character's emotional high in every second of the mutilation of his victims. "Mr. Skinner, you've created a character that was so naturally evil and depraved that it is impossible to find any redeeming quality in him. Yet, it is impossible to stop marveling at the absolute purity of every vile, monstrous act." Skinner giddily accepted the compliment. In addition to the very graphic portions, Martha liked the short portraits of the two victims. The stories of their precipitous fall into poverty and homelessness created a sympathetic base that made their murders and mutilation more horrific. That sympathy made Andrew's fear as he watched Anjanette's death and mutilation even more palpable. Since Andrew knew that he was to face the same fate, the descriptions of her bleeding out through a tube and the barbaric mutilations became more horrific. As she told Skinner, "It made me shiver knowing that the horror that Andrew was watching, he would be suffering soon. It made the horrific act even more horrific. It made the monstrous act even more monstrous, even more depraved. I feel like I really know them, like they're real people," she commented. Skinner thought, "Silly woman, they were real." He had to restrain a laugh. He settled for a broad grin. Martha returned the smile. "You have a right to be pleased. This is well done. Pleased. It's so much more than being pleased. It's electrifying." Chapter 41. Take a hike. By the time midnight struck, Maberly had the kitchen table covered with maps and data. Uncharacteristically, the material on the table was not nearly up to Maberly's obsessive-compulsive standards for symmetry. In the center was an 18 by 24 sheet of tracing paper. Under it was a topographical map of the north slope of Mount St. Helens. He quickly traced the map. He removed it and replaced it with a map of the location of the pumice plain. He traced the area. It covered a huge section. He replaced that with a map of the known fumarole locations. Many were above the pumice plain, but there were several below it. There were also a few in the cliffs south of a large inlet of Spirit Lake. He mapped the quickest, most efficient trails to get to all of the probable fumaroles. As he figured it, it would take a major portion of 2, maybe even 3-day trips to complete the hike. He created a list of equipment that they would need, including gas masks and oxygen canisters, and a list of the recommended type of clothing that would be suitable. He also created a list of equipment that they would need if they decided to camp overnight instead of trekking downhill in the evening and then back up in the morning. It was his great hope that they would decide to camp overnight. He would love to regale them with fascinating facts about volcanoes and tales of his trips to the far corners of the world to study nature's most powerful beast. Maberly felt like a 6-year-old waiting for Santa to deliver the train for which he had prayed. Finally, at 2 in the morning, he sent an email to Agent Parker of the list of gear that they would need. He scanned and then attached the map of the trails and fumaroles. He finished the email with, "We need to get an early start. Let's meet at the observatory at 5:30 a.m. tomorrow morning." He hoped for a quick reply and sat at his computer for an hour before Parker's response came. Everything would be ready when the time came. He looked at the clock and realized what time it was. He tidied up the table, stacked the books, neatly folded the maps, and set each pencil and pen in a straight line across the top of the table. When everything was in its proper place, he headed to bed where, too excited to close his eyes, he stared at the ceiling. Chapter 42. Chosen. Parker's eyelids crept open to a mere slit. A dull, fuzzy silvery surface floated inches away. In the reflection, he saw his partially open lids. The flat, silver surface moved closer and touched the bridge of his nose. It was smooth and cool. It slowly slid down his nose and onto his upper lip. It pushed his lower lip down and then released it as it moved down his chin and under it. Just below his Adam's apple, it stopped and rotated. He felt a sharp edge. It dragged across his throat. He felt a thin scratch. It stung. His eyes sprung open. A foot away, 2 eyes were boring into his. He snapped his eyes shut and pushed himself back and up against the headboard. As his head hit the headboard, he opened his eyes. The piercing eyes were gone. He grabbed his throat. He felt the edge of a thin, shallow cut. His hand was moist. He held it up in front of him. It was too dark to see what the wetness was, but through his wide-spread fingers, he saw a wide shaft of light from the street lamp shining through the window and spreading across the room. Standing half-lit at the edge of the beam was a tall figure. A narrow, silver piece repeatedly flashed at the man's side as it twisted back and forth in the light. Parker twisted and lunged toward the nightstand. In one motion, he grabbed his Glock, chambered a shell, turned back to the man, and put the sight on the center of his chest. Parker squinted the figure into focus. Fear turned into anger and surged in Parker. "What the hell? Right? What the hell are you doing here? Why did you cut me?" Wright took another step toward him. 2 dark wings spread up and out behind Wright. They wrapped around and engulfed Wright. They held him for a mere second and sprung open, folded back, and collapsed behind Wright. In a full ray of light stood the old shaman from the restaurant. "One more fucking step," Parker barked, "and I'll send you back to your ancestors." The shaman calmly replied, "It's time. We need to prepare you. There is much pain ahead, and you must be ready. It's already pretty fucking painful. Why the hell did you cut me? To make sure that you weren't under Paise's control. If you are cut while possessed by Paise, you will heal within seconds. You did not heal. You are not possessed. Great. You got your answer. Now leave. I told you that I would come again when it was time to prepare. We need to start the ceremony tonight because it will take several days to complete." "What ceremony? If you think I'm going to do some Native American sweat lodge crap or spin around a pole with hooks through my nipples, you've lost your mind. Find someone else. I'm not Cowlitz. Hell, I'm not even Native American. Once Colus has chosen, there is no one else." "Why me?" "You know why. You were told why. You are the only one involved in the case who is without hate and darkness. Only a warrior without hate and darkness can survive the preparation ceremony. Only a warrior who survives the ceremony can conquer Paise and Tapilo. It is darkness and hate in people that Tapilo uses to bend them to his will. Since they are not in you, he can't control you. You are the warrior. I told you when I came the first time that if you do not do this, the killings would continue and get worse. The old man had been right. The killings had gotten worse, and there was no sign that they would ever stop. The old shaman continued, "We must start now. You will find Tapi Lo soon. If you know that, tell me where he is." "I do not know where he is. I only know that Koluz feels that Tapi Lo and Paase are preparing for battle. How do you know I can defeat them?" "I don't, but it is my mission to prepare you." "So, what do I do? Spend a week in a sweat lodge?" "No. You will wish it were just a sweat lodge. I have to prepare you for the battle and the pain that you must endure to defeat Paase and Tapi Lo. The ceremony will bind you to Koluz. You must begin now." Parker sat motionless for several minutes. He could disbelieve the shaman and call this a nightmare, a very vivid nightmare. He could take the chance that all of what he was experiencing was illusion or simple delusion. Then again, what did he have to lose? If he kept his delusion to himself and went through the ceremony, there was really nothing to lose. "Okay, what do I do?" "You will have to remove the remaining talents." Parker cringed. It had been excruciating to have the first ones removed. He looked at the old shaman pitifully. "Crap. Do I have a choice to say no?" "Only if you are willing to let many more people be mutilated and die." The shaman took the 2 talons that he had removed and the one that Parker had removed off a leather string that he wore around his neck. He raised them over his head. A streak of blue lightning struck the talons. Instantly, the old shaman and Parker were seated on top of a bare mound in a forest. Around them were platforms on poles 8 feet high. It was a burial ground. Parker swung his head from side to side. The shaman touched his arm and told him that this was the sacred burial ground of warriors who had fought Paase and Tapi Lo. Some had won and some had lost, but all had fought with honor and bravery. That was what was expected from Parker. The shaman laid the talons that had already been removed in front of Parker. As soon as they touched the ground, the pain started. The scars from the talons appeared, split open, and blood began to drip from them. Parker could feel the talons twisting inside his shoulders. "You must begin now, or you will die." Parker reached to the farthest hole and inserted his finger and thumb. To drive the fingers deeper, he had to tear the skin. The deeper he probed, the more the skin tore. He howled, but pushed deeper. The blood was bubbling out around his hand. Finally, he felt the sharp tip of the talon. He pressed his thumb and finger together around the tip and pulled. His finger and thumb snapped together, and the talon slipped deeper. He dug in again. It slipped deeper again. He pulled his hand out. "I can't get it out." "You must, or you will die, and many other people will die." Parker took a deep breath and drove his thumb and 2 fingers hard into the hole. The skin split more. He pushed as hard as he could until a full inch of the talon was between his thumb and 2 fingers. He dug his fingernail into the rough surface of the talon. The muscles in the shoulder tore. His fingernails settled behind small bumps, and he pulled. It started to slip. He regripped and pulled hard. The resistant talon slowly moved. 10 seconds more of pulling, and the talon fell from his hand and onto the ground. Immediately, it was drawn to the others. Parker was exhausted. Finally, it was over. He looked mournfully at the shaman. "You mean I'm going to have to go through 4 more nights of this?" "No, only 2 more. 2 more." And then it dawned on him. He would have to do 2 each night. 2. I'll never survive 2 a night. There is no choice. It's 2 or die. Parker looked at the old shaman, bared his teeth, growled, and jammed his thumb and 2 fingers into another hole. He split the skin wider than the first time. The pain was greater than the first time, but Parker was determined to make the pain, however horrible it was, as short as possible. The blood was nearly flowing from the wound as he pulled out the talon and dropped it to the ground. It slid over to the others. The shaman scooped up the talons. Lightning flashed, and Parker was back in his hotel room, sitting on a chair. Wright was standing where he had last seen him. "So, what do you think?" Wright asked. Parker quickly felt his chest and shoulders. There were no holes, no scars. "Are you okay?" "Sure. I'm fine. Just really tired and worn out. This has been a tough case." "Yeah. Coming back and having to deal with Looney Tunes Lindy can't be easy." That was not what Parker meant, but agreeing with it was better than the truth. Wright closed the conversation. Anyway, I'll let you get some sleep. We'll talk more in the morning. Thanks. I'm really drained. I know how you feel. She flushed me down the drain 6 years ago when she booted me from the first spooky case. Almost ruined my career. Yeah, she can be brutal, Parker agreed. Chapter 43. Hard Feelings and Secrets. An ear-piercing sound like a dog whistle for humans flashed Lindy's eyes open. It was 5 a.m. There was a threat. Something had happened. She pushed it aside. The instant she closed her eyes, the migraine-like neon ring appeared and began pulsing relentlessly. Within minutes, she knew that there was only one way to get relief: obey. She heard a simple command: see Captain Johnson. The moment she surrendered to the command, the neon vanished and the headache was gone. The high-pitched screech melded into a soothing, harmonious tone. She rose, dressed, and headed to the station. A cold drizzle had struck the northwest area during the night and had decided to stay around into the wee hours of the morning. It was too early, too wet, and too cold for anyone to be up and trying to think, but it was the perfect time for a private meeting to go over new evidence and not be disturbed. At the rap on the door jamb, Captain Johnson looked up from the morning's dreaded, tedious paperwork, which he had failed to complete the night before and had to come in early to do. Wright, who was already seated to the left in front of the captain's desk, looked over his shoulder at Parker and gave a flicking wave of his hand. Parker wearily returned Wright's wave. He had stayed up late patiently listening to Susan give a detailed account of how she and the other investigators had discovered the names and backgrounds of the last two victims, Andrew Teller and Anjanette Sitzman. Captain Johnson said, "Enter Agent Lotus Blossom and Agent Simpson. Have a seat. We've been waiting for you." Agent Simpson glanced at Agent Parker. "Agent Lotus Blossom," Captain Johnson explained. "That's what we sometimes called him because of his Zen thing." "Makes sense to me," Agent Simpson replied. Parker said, "Melinda is on her way up, Captain, and—" Johnson interrupted. "It would probably be a good idea to get Detective Martin in here too. Otherwise, she'll be pissed off, and we don't want to see her in one of those moods." Parker rolled his eyes as he tilted his head up. Then he dropped his head and shook it at the captain's misstep. He knew that following closely behind him was Detective Martin. Parker quietly said, "Whoops. Nice timing, Captain." Captain Johnson dropped his head and joined Parker's side-to-side shake. Had he known that she was within earshot, he would have used more discretion. "And what kind of mood would that be, Captain?" Lindy curtly inquired. Johnson stood and peeked around Parker. "Oh, Detective Martin. What's up?" "I asked you what kind of mood that would be," she said combatively. "Discomfort." Agent Simpson grimaced at Parker. Johnson had already stepped into the stinking pile that he had created, but he was not the kind of man who would back down from a perceived attack, especially not from someone who was working on a week-long snit. He stepped to the side, looked squarely into her eyes, and sternly said, "The kind of mood you're starting to get into right now. Surly, your next phase will be sharpening your teeth and seeing how many heads you can bite off before the end of the day. He's Saturday now. Take a seat," he commanded. She deliberately sat slowly. He rolled his eyes at her pointless, infantile act and waited for her to boil over and spew steam. He could see Detective Martin boiling, but surprisingly somehow, she kept the lid on. He discovered that he wasn't alone in his amazement. Wright had a stunned expression. Parker, who had been holding his breath, exhaled, noticeably relieved. Agent Simpson still had an uncomfortable expression. With Johnson ensconced behind his desk, Parker pulled up one of the several chairs that were along the wall of the captain's office. He sat on the other side of Detective Wright. Agent Simpson set her chair next to Agent Parker. There came a knock on the captain's door jamb. It was Melinda. "Jesus, getting crowded in here. 3 more and we'll have enough for a baseball team." Captain Johnson told her to grab a chair and find a spot. She put her chair next to Detective Martin. "Parker, I hope you didn't start without me," Melinda remarked. "I'd never do that. I assume that you all are aware that we now know who the 2 recent victims were," Captain Johnson said. Attempting to ease the tension, Wright quipped, "Actually, they're still who they are. They're just a wee bit more dead." Detective Martin's head jerked slightly. Small worry lines formed between her eyes. It went unnoticed, except for Parker. He glanced at her out of the corner of his eye and then refocused his attention on Melinda. "Tell them what you found, and don't hesitate to brag about how clever you were." Melinda, in detail, went through her process in discovering the tephra and pumicite and how the addition of the sulfur dioxide smell might be able to give them a location for the murder site. Detective Martin began to fidget with her watch. Melinda then told them that she and Parker had recruited a volcanologist, Edwin Maberly, who was mapping possible locations where all elements would be present. They expected him to have the information in 2 or 3 days. Parker squirmed a bit. "That's right. There's a lot of area to cover, and it takes a while to coordinate all the maps." Agent Simpson looked at Parker and whispered out of the corner of her mouth, "Why didn't you tell me?" Parker sheepishly whispered back, "Sorry, slipped my mind." Agent Simpson frowned heavily at Parker. "Are you two still with us?" Captain Johnson asked as he looked at Agents Simpson and Parker. "We're fine. Just straightening out something," Agent Simpson said. Detective Martin began more vigorously twisting the watch back and forth on her wrist. Parker nodded Detective Wright's attention to the watch twisting. Wright quizzically frowned back to Parker and shrugged slightly. When Detective Martin became aware of the silent stares, she abruptly pulled her hand away from the watch. A small trickle of blood appeared on her wrist. She quickly wiped it away. Captain Johnson caught Wright's and Parker's silent communication just in time to see Lindy wipe away another trickle of blood. "Detective Martin, are you okay? You look quite agitated." "Oh no, I'm just excited. We finally have a couple of leads. You know, if we can find the murder site, it could lead us to the killer." She shifted uncomfortably, put her hands on the arms of the chair, and prepared to rise. "Well, are we done here?" She moved to the edge of the seat and stopped. She looked at the captain. "So, you're sure this Mabley guy won't be done with his map for another 2 or 3 days, right?" The captain nodded toward Parker. "Parker talked to him, not me." Detective Martin didn't even want to acknowledge that Parker was in the room, let alone talk to him. So, she expressed her feelings with a look that was unmistakable. Parker read her features well, squirmed a bit, and, trying to avoid a confrontation, gave as short an answer as possible. "That's what he said. So, where did you find him?" Immediately recognizing her harsh tone, Parker continued to keep his answer short and calm. "At Johnston Ridge Observatory," Parker said. She slung her head around and angrily gritted out, "So, is he there now?" Parker looked at her quizzically for a second and then responded, "Don't know. Could be at home." "Where's that?" "I have no idea." It was a standoff with a quizzical, slightly worried look from Parker and a belligerent look from Martin. "Looking for a date to the prom, Lindy?" Melinda teased. With no sign that Detective Martin had heard the remark, she abruptly said, "I've got to go." She snatched her venomous look away from Parker, rose quickly, and strode out of the office. They watched her as she scurried away. "Lindy seemed kind of hostile, didn't she, Captain?" Wright commented. "Kind of. On a good day, maybe." Ever since this case started, she's been on edge. Lately, she's either angry or drifting in a never-never land, even more so since Parker arrived. "Maybe she's swooning for her former lover," Wright said. "I wouldn't say that to her unless you're wearing an iron jockstrap or you don't mind being a eunuch," Melinda warned. Failing to extract a response from Parker, Wright repeated, "Parker, I said, maybe she's swooning for her former lover." "Parker, Earth to Parker. Didn't you hear me?" "What?" Johnson and Wright glanced at each other and then returned their attention to Parker. Agent Simpson smiled awkwardly. Parker vacantly asked, "Didn't Detective Martin, seem kind of weird to you?" "What do you think we've been talking about?" Johnson remarked. So, why would she want to know where he lived?" "Does that seem like an odd question to ask?" Parker asked. "Not if she wants to go to his house," Melinda said. "Maybe she wants to ask him some questions." "Maybe she wants to beat you to the punch," Wright countered. "Right. Find the site before you do." Johnson added. Melinda reinforced. We're talking about Detective Martin, and when it comes to Parker, sometimes she acts as if she's 5 years old. I can't believe I just said that. Sometimes the terrible twos, Johnson amplified. And I didn't say that either. Parker knew Detective Martin better and more intimately than any of them, and could have said far worse things about her. However, he tucked his tongue away and resisted. While he wasn't feeling hate for her and had never hated her, his feelings weren't zen-like, but it was all he had at that moment. So, what are you hanging around here for? You got work to do. So, get to it, Captain Johnson emphatically ordered. Chapter 44. Call for help. As if a shot of electricity had driven up his spine, Skinner bolted upright in bed. Something was wrong. He didn't know what it was, but something was threatening him. Then that buzzing harmony began, and all he could think about was seeing Detective Martin. He grabbed his cell phone from a nightstand and dialed her number. Answer your damn phone, he said after only the second ring. Come on. Jesus, bitch, answer your fucking phone. Finally, it's about time. What do you want? She asked brusquely. Where are you? I'm in my office. Stay there. I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said and hung up. He threw the covers off and set his feet on the hardwood floors. He shivered fiercely as the cold and damp bored to his core. He wrapped the comforter around his shoulders and stood. He slipped out of his warm sweatpants and thermal top. He shuffled to the walk-in closet. As he reached for his blue flannel shirt, the warm comforter dropped from his shoulders and a chill shot through his body. The shirt was cold, and it chilled him even further. It was probably a mistake to forego underwear, but he was in a hurry. As he pulled on his cold jeans, he shivered. The tennis shoes were donned without socks, making his feet even colder. A short distance away was a warm, inviting bed. For a second, he considered crawling back in, but a sharp pain in his temple changed his mind. The pain made it clear that he had to see Detective Martin. Now, he had neither shaved nor showered and had simply ignored his curly hair. He was out the door and on his way to Martin's office in a few minutes. He might have been awakened by a shock of panic, but it wasn't panic that drove him to her. Part of it was the fear of another shot of pain piercing his temple, but most of what drove him was the glorious anticipation that he was being called upon to commit more turmoil, spread more terror. He nearly salivated at the prospect of carving again. I'm not waiting. Skinner. Detective Martin pulled her cell phone away from her ear and looked at it. Bastard. She hung up. She wondered if Skinner somehow knew about the meeting with Johnson and the others. It had hit Detective Martin hard. Her eyes darted around her office as if she were looking for something that kept evading her. Her hands began to shake, her teeth clenched tightly, and her body shuddered. Parker and the others knew that the murders were connected in some way with Mount St. Helens. They might not know about the cavern, but eventually they would find it and maybe even link Skinner to it. She knew that she had to do something to steer the investigation away from Mount St. Helens, or at least slow it down. But she had been caught off guard at the meeting, and she could see from Parker's suspicious frown that her awkward inquiry about Maberly's home address had hoisted up a red flag in Parker's mind. Parker was always suspicious of everyone. It was his natural condition, and she feared that Parker was becoming suspicious of her. And regardless of what she felt about him, he was too smart and too inquisitive to be ignored. Waylaying the investigation by sending it on another wild goose chase was no longer an option. She had done that too often. Besides, while it might work on the others, Parker just wouldn't go for it. It would only serve to make him look even closer at her. So, she sat staring at nothing while her dread built. Then the throbbing started. First, it was a rhythmic jerk of a finger, then a pulse of her jugular, and finally a pounding in her head. As the pounding slowed, a high-pitched whine rose and humming started. She was being commanded to do something, but not told what to do. As she waited for Skinner to arrive, she tried to think of something that could protect Skinner, passe, and topple low. Nothing came. She slammed the heels of her hands against her forehead to jar away the humming. It got louder. After a few painful seconds, it drove Martin out from behind her desk in hopes that the caffeine machine would provide some relief. She opened her door. In front of her stood Skinner with an angry frown and a penetrating stare. Something's wrong. I feel like something's happened. What is it? What did you fuck up? Martin took exception with Skinner's hostility. She snapped, "Come in," and shut the door. The phone rang. She gritted her teeth, spun around, and snatched up the desk phone. Detective Martin, homicide. A pitifully pleading voice responded, "Lindy." Martin was instantly annoyed. The voice was all too familiar, and she had more pressing issues than rescuing the perpetually lost soul of Ashley Barkley. "What is it?" Lindy asked disdainfully. Ashley's voice cracked at her first utterance. "Oh, Lindy, there's so much blood, and I—" Her voice faded until all that could be heard was senseless muttering and then muffled sobs. The humming in Lindy's head was replaced by pounding again. She didn't need this, not now. "Calm down, Ashley. Pull yourself together and tell me what's going on," she snapped. Skinner made eye contact and mouthed, "Who is it?" Lindy shot a frown back at him. He gave her an insistent look, and Lindy mouthed Ashley Barkley. Unable to read her lips, Skinner mouthed, "Who?" "Hold on a second, Ashley," Lindy whispered, "Ashley Barkley," to Skinner. Skinner quietly demanded that Lindy put Ashley on the phone speaker. She did, and then continued, "Ashley, tell me what's happened." After a couple of sniffles and a whimpering sigh, she cleared her throat and said, "The man I was with." She fell silent for a moment and then wailed, "Oh my God, there's so much blood." "Are you hurt?" "No." "He's gone, and the blood. There's so much blood." "So, the blood's not yours?" "No. I already told you that. You need to calm down." "Have you called 911? "No. I can't. I won't. My father. You know what he'll—" "Don't worry. I'll call your father, and he can send someone to pick you up." Skinner touched Lindy's arm and shook his head no as a wicked little smile grew. "Asleep? No. Please don't. Please. Just come and get me. I need you. Please help me." Martin's anger left no room for sympathy. She curtly responded, Okay. Just tell me where you are." "I don't know." Skinner held back a chuckle. "Look at your room key," Lindy ordered. "I don't have it." Skinner covered his mouth to hold back an audible laugh. "Then look for something with the name on it, like stationery," Lindy said. "This is not the kind of place that has stationery," Ashley informed. "Just check." Ashley searched through the room. Her search revealed it not only didn't have stationery, it also didn't have complimentary soap or shampoo or even fresh towels. After several minutes listening to Ashley bang around the room looking, Lindy told her to go outside and check the name on a sign. "I can't. I don't have any clothes. I don't know where they are." Skinner snickered as he shook his head in disbelief. "Check your cell phone. It's the burner phone I bought so my father couldn't track me." Martin's anger was now divided between a pleading Ashley and a chuckling Skinner. She decided to attack Ashley. "Damn, Ashley. How the hell did you end up in a hotel with no clothes and a man's blood on you? What the hell have you done?" The berating sent Ashley into a confused panic. She rapidly rattled off, "There's no blood on me. It's on the bed. Please don't be angry with me. I don't know. I don't know how I got here. I don't know how it happened, but I think he did things to me. I'm so sore. It hurts. You're the only one I can turn to. You're the only real friend I have. Please help me. I don't know what to do." Martin never saw Ashley as a friend, just an unwanted obligation. Her inclination was to continue reading her the riot act and call 911, but Ashley's panic pleading had pulled her back. Sounding as sympathetic as she could, Martin calmly told her to call the front desk and ask for the address. Martin could hear Ashley set her cell phone down. When Ashley picked up her cell, her still shaking voice stuttered out, "There's no room phone." So it's that kind of place, Detective Martin thought. Look for something in the room that has the name on it. There should at least be a fire evacuation sheet on the door. A few seconds later, Ashley said, "It's the Calico Cat Hotel. What room are you in?" "I don't know." "Then look on the door." Jesus, was this child born without any common sense? Detective Martin could hear the door open and then close. 7. The first floor, right? Yeah, I guess so. Calico Cat Hotel is located near the southern edge of the downtown precinct, just barely inside Detective Martin's precinct. It was best known for an evening trio of prostitutes roaming around out front and in and out of rooms that rented by the hour. It was no place for a mayor's daughter, especially one with no clothes, no memory, and bloody bed sheets. However, she was there, and Martin, although surprised, could still believe it. Ashley had been in precarious situations before, but none had come close to this. But to Detective Martin, Ashley had inevitably been heading to this or something similar. "Leave everything alone," Detective Martin ordered. "I'm on my way." Detective Martin looked hard at Skinner. "We have a problem." She then told Skinner about her meeting with Johnson and the others. When Skinner heard the words Mount St. Helens, the blood drained from his head and forced him to sit in the chair in front of Detective Martin's desk. He pressed both hands against his forehead. He held that position for 15 seconds. Suddenly, his head jerked up. He stared at Lindy, smiled his devilish smile, and said, "Perfect." "Perfect? How can this possibly be perfect?" "Yes, perfect. They'll find the cavern." "No, they won't. You're willing to bet your life on that." "I won't have to because they're going to be too busy trying to find Ashley and raising the money so that the kidnappers don't kill her." "Kidnappers?" "Yes, kidnappers. You see, they're going to ask for ransom. And while you guys are trying to find Ashley and getting the ransom money together, I'll take care of our cavern issue. See, we don't have a problem. We have a solution, and it's Ashley." He winked at Lindy, gave a wave of his hand, and cheerily informed, "See you at the Calico Cat Hotel. Don't worry, I know where it is. Hey, dress conservatively. You don't want anyone to get the wrong idea, or maybe you do." He laughed and left.